Hey y'all, welcome back to the Takeoff. On this episode, we've got Sydney Olson, who, in my humble opinion, is the most dominant competitive parkour athlete that I think our sport has seen to date. It was a blast jumping into this one. I've, like many of the people on the show, known Sydney for a really long time, and I always appreciate hearing her perspective, especially given the context of what she has done in our sport. So, for about a decade, she was really redefining the bar for women in competitive parkour and on the streets in style parkour. And then she has moved since then really heavily into the stunt industry and been incredibly involved in that, building a really successful professional career as a stunt person. So we talk a lot in this episode about how these sort of different sections of her life have fit together and the lessons that she's learned as she has moved from sort of one identity as a professional parkour athlete into maybe a more balanced identity as somebody who makes parkour part of their career and part of their life, but is not as defined by it. And if you've ever struggled with these sort of concepts of identity, I am absolutely somebody who's struggled with this and wondered, when it's time to take a step back and maybe reassess your relationship to either your career or your sport or your hobby, anything like that. I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Before we dig in, I'll also say you might notice a few jump cuts in this one. Margot was homesick on this episode, and so there were a couple sections where she decided to start singing Old MacDonald while she tried to take a nap. That's what's happening when that cuts. If you hear any weird noises in the background, that's my darling baby girl babbling to herself in her crib. So my apologies if that distracts you, but she's pretty rad, and I enjoyed having her along this, and it gave me and Sydney a couple great laughs. So let's get into it. I hope you enjoy it. As always, thanks for listening. Sydney Olson, welcome to the Takeoff. Thanks so much for coming on and being flexible. I will say for the listener that I currently have my door open if you're watching because my daughter is trying to fall asleep in the next room. So if I suddenly rush out mid-conversation, we all know what happened.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to get to do this interview with you. And then you get to come on my podcast soon too. So really grateful for that.
I know. I'm like, ooh, what are we gonna talk about? I don't even know. I like getting the table flipped and getting to be back on it because I feel like for the longest time, as you know, when you're especially in the peak like height drop modus store podcast era, I would be on all of them and you're just answering questions and stuff. And it is weird to be on the other side of the mic. How's that transition been for you?
Yeah, definitely an adjustment at first. When I first started my podcast, I was like, wait, what are we going to talk about? And then it actually comes really naturally. I actually enjoy usually interviewing people more than I actually like being interviewed a lot of times. And I notice that in my life too. Oftentimes, if I'm having a conversation with someone, I'm kind of more interested in what they're up to rather than like sharing what I'm up to. It just kind of goes in phases, I guess.
Yeah, what would you say the theme of your podcast overall is?
Really don't know. I was trying to figure it out. And I think the issue with it is that it's like, it's not really an issue, but it's more of like there's so many different topics and there's depending on the guest, we kind of get into certain things. Like I've had a mortician on there to explain all about like death and what happens to your body after you die and all that. She's someone I grew up with, so it was just like I've always wanted to interview her because I find it so fascinating. But then I also have had a lot of ex-athletes or like high achievers, and I noticed that that's kind of a theme across the board is high achievers. So I would say the podcast is kind of like almost like a self-acceptance podcast of learning to just be okay with who you are.
Was that a reflection of the journey that you've been on, or do you feel like it was more of a like, I'm going through this experience, I'm curious what other people who are going through this experience are
Yeah,
like? I guess does it feel like you're looking at it in the rearview mirror, or do you feel like you're going through currently still the process of sort of
I think it's a bit of both.
reacclimating?
Like I definitely went through it and then I still have days where it doesn't feel quite like it's a finished product or anything. And nothing ever really is when you think about it. Everything's always a journey and you're always like stepping into the next sort of spiral of it, if that makes sense, where you've like gotten past this thing, but then there's the next layer of it and the next layer and all that. So I feel like it's a little bit of both. Like I want to help people that are sort of going through that experience right now of feeling like maybe they're not good enough and there's something to prove and there's something to do and all that. And then then I also am having my own journey with that over and over again. And so I love to be able to just share experiences of that.
Yeah, what was the first? I'm curious. I mean, I very much resonate, and because you've gotten to meet Margot when she was very tiny, and as she grows, it's like the constant reassessment. I almost hate good training days now, not because I hate good training days, but because it's like, oh, wow, if I tried really hard and like had time, I could still really probably do harder stuff than I've ever done
Mm.
physically at this point. And then you go home and then like your kid is sick and you don't sleep for 3 days and you're like, oh yeah, this is why I'm not like doing stuff 8 stories in the air anymore. But that's been one of many moments in my life where I feel like you kind of have these branching pathways, and whether it's as an athlete or in your career or whatever. I mean, I remember for me, probably the first time I felt it is when I went to college and or university for our international listening audience. And I remember making the decision to go, and many of my friends, like Dylan Baker, making the decision at the same time to not go, and then seeing them get on, like some of them were on Ultimate Parkour Challenge and Jump City and the Free Runner. Like they all of a sudden there was this sort of like a burst of activity in the US parkour scene for 2010 to 2014 or 15, which was exactly when I was in university. And I remember looking at it and just sitting in math class, like fuming that my friends are in Kuwait filming amazing videos for Red Bull Art of Motion, or like on set for 6 months shooting and making a ton of money. Well, for Freerunner, probably not making a ton of money, but making more money than I was making, certainly coaching parkour at the time. And that was the first time that I think I had to learn to like process my feelings. But do you have like a memory of the first time that you started to struggle with that?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think of the first time I struggled with that. I think it was around the time that
Just constant.
yeah, the first time. I guess it was kind of similar. Like I was going down this path of becoming a nurse. I was going to be a nurse, and I became a nursing assistant. And I noticed that like a lot of my friends were still going out and training, and all of a sudden I had this full-time job. And I was thinking, man, is this really what I want to be doing? Is this like what I want with the rest of my life? And I would see people doing all these things, some people that were like less talented, like just going for it. And I was like, why haven't I gone for it? Like where is this coming from? And so it was a good call to investigation. I think that was probably the first time I experienced it. I'm sure I experienced it more in childhood too. I feel like I I grew up with like a lot of extreme jealousy and envy, like of around everyone around me, because I just always wanted something that I didn't have. And then eventually like came around to realizing that my life is my life and I have everything I need. And what I'm reaching for is something that I still have within me now. And if I want to do anything, I'm more than capable of doing it. It's just that there's certain things that I need to be able to step into, if that makes sense. So rather than just like staying
Mm-hmm.
where I'm at and being like, yeah, this sucks, like, is there something that I can take action on? Is there something I could be doing differently? Or is there just, like you said, a feeling that I need to process or be with?
Yeah. I'm curious, like, how do you internally differentiate between, I guess, overcoming jealousy or this sort of like misplaced anxiety around wanting something that somebody else has, and complacency? Because I think as I've gotten older, that's such a balancing act of showing up every day to a session or whatever it is and going, I don't really want to do that. Am I just being complacent and stepping back, or have I just matured?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I think a lot of times the complacency, we can mistake like one thing for another, right? But at the same time, it's just like, what are you feeling in the moment? And when I notice that I'm having sort of a jealousy, it's cool because then I'm like, oh, there's still that part of me that likes to come up, and jealousy for me often comes into the realm of like, I should be doing something different, is the underlying feeling. Like, I'm doing something wrong. I need to be doing something different. And then I just sit with myself and I ask, is that really the truth? Or is this just a story that I'm making up in my mind? Because at the end of the day, everything's sort of a narrative and a story that we tell ourselves. So even the terms of complacency, one thing that I noticed is when I stopped feeling the need to prove myself, I started not training as much and I started like not pushing myself as much. And then there was like an underlying fear that would come about, is like, oh, am I just not going to get any better now? But then that's also that
Mhm.
story. And so it's like, oh, is it okay that maybe I've shifted my priorities and I'm, 33 years old and sometimes I want to maybe put my focus on some other things. Sorry, my cat's like trying to bite my chest. but but yeah, it's like learning to be okay with all of those emotions that come up because I think formerly I'd see jealousy as a really bad thing, so it was something I would try and shove down and be like, bad Sydney, you can't have that. But then once I realized that actually it's just pointing me to something that I want to learn to be okay with or accept within myself, then it was a lot easier to kind of feel that emotion and then let it dissipate. So it's the same with like complacency and all that too. Is like, is it complacency or is it just like the story that I'm making up about it? If that makes sense.
Yeah. I like the idea that this is probably true for everybody in some to some extent, and maybe there's just layers of self-realization where people don't necessarily realize that their jealousy is actually rooted in a lot of, I mean, I would say probably every time rooted in an insecurity about what you are doing to get yourself into this situation that you're admiring in that moment or jealous of. And that's a good way to think about how to harness some of those energies that people maybe
Mm.
think of as being, yeah, damaging or negative or whatever, and being able to embrace them and, yeah, look through them to find the root of the thing that you're interested in engaging, being able to engage it. I think that's a cool way to frame it.
Yeah, and I think that's
When
sorry, just real quick
Oh no, go
on
for
this,
it.
because I think the jealousy element is actually quite a cool one because if you notice yourself feeling envious or jealous of something that someone has or whatever, it's actually just usually an untapped potential that you actually have within yourself. And maybe you haven't quite accepted it because it's so easy to see things in other people, but it isn't always easy to see things like that in ourselves. And it goes the other way too, where you'll notice like all the things that are annoying in someone else, but then that's usually a quality that you have in yourself too that you haven't quite like accepted. So I
Yeah.
like to think of it like that with the jealousy element. If I notice that that's coming up, it's like, oh, what do they express right now that maybe I could express a little bit more within myself?
Yeah. No, that's why I'm jealous of Nate Weston's side
I'm
flips.
so
It's because I want to be able to express better side flip precision technique in
exactly.
my own life. Yeah, so I was going to say that I'm sure a lot of people who are listening know that you started your training journey in Washington, but we're talking about, seeing other people succeed, seeing sort of like this growth and development process. And when you moved down to LA and started to kind of tap into this next phase in your career, what internally was it like? I mean, you were saying how you were kind of jealous, or maybe not jealous, but just noticing other people really betting on
Mm.
themselves. So what was happening internally in your head when you made the decision to move away from that nursing assistant track and go full on into parkour and stunts?
So I actually, before I moved to LA, I had moved to China because I was a nursing assistant for about a year and a half and decided I definitely wasn't going to be a nurse. And I moved to China to teach English and I lived there for a year. And while I was there, I was noticing it come up a lot more. I'd see videos of people like Lucy Romberg, and I was like, oh my God, there's something in this that like I really feel that I'm going to be doing someday. And I don't know what it is. And I knew maybe it would be stunts, maybe it would be parkour. I just wasn't sure, but I knew that there was something that she was doing that I just felt really connected to and wanted to explore. So when I moved back to the Seattle area, I decided to do one of the SPL competitions. Back then it was NAPC. I think it was their second one that they ever had back in 2014. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go to this competition now and I'm just going to like, I don't know, compete. I had never really done a parkour competition before and I was so nervous. And they actually only took um, groups, like it was a battle style basically, and you had a partner and you go back.
That one
Yeah.
with Jesse and Corey in the final
Yes.
round. I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yep.
I went to that and I wasn't sure what was going to happen.
Who was your partner?
It was Caleb Earl. He was from Seattle, and he was one of the
Okay.
people that I trained with a lot. I have no idea what he's up to now. I'm so curious, actually, on like all those training people that I used to like hang out with in the Seattle area, what they're up to. But I don't really think any of them train anymore. But anyway, he was my partner, and so I went into this being like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I can't believe I'm doing this. But there was just kind of like this, I would say unconscious incompetence. Like I didn't know like how bad it was or anything like that, which was good because then it made me like cocky in some way, like enough to
Hmm.
go for it. And so I was actually the only female that ended up in the main event. And I don't remember how we placed or anything. We didn't make the podium, but it was just like, oh my God, I made it into the main competition. What am I doing? I can't believe I'm doing this. So I competed, and afterwards, Jesse and Corey actually like talked to me for a minute, and I told them I wanted to get into stunts. And a week later, I got a call from Jesse about a music video, and they were going to hire this one girl to do it, and she just had to do like a little bit of parkour, and it was only going to pay $500. And for her that's like an insult, but for me it was like life changing because I was making $12 an
Yeah.
hour at my nursing assistant job. By the way, I did go back and work as a nursing assistant for a few months after I got back from China, just because I was trying to figure it out, like what I was going to do. So anyway,
You gave it an honest college try
yes,
after China.
yes, exactly. And so then I came down to LA. I worked that one job, went back to Seattle, and I was like, yeah, that's it. I'm quitting. And so I put in my 2 weeks notice, and I was like just trying to figure out a way to move to LA and make it work. And I would say the jealousy so much like had dissipated by then because I felt like I was taking action on what I really wanted to do. So there was kind of like no more of this jealousy. It's more of like, I'm just, this is what it is. Like I'm taking action on this goal, and I know that eventually I'll reach it, but I'm just in the thick of it. And so I was in the thick of it for years
Hmm.
before it like really came to fruition by any means. And it would have its ups and downs where it felt closer and then further away. It's kind of like the white belt mentality, right? You get into a new discipline or something, and then you see how much you have to grow and you see how much you need to improve on. And so then I felt like I was there for a really long time before I started climbing back up and getting more of that like conscious competence, like being aware of all the ways in which
Hmm.
it was working for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. I like the white belt mentality reference because I feel like that's something that almost goes hand in hand for me with these like reassessment moments where often that's how I end up recalibrating is if I start to feel jealous or start to feel like I'm being pulled in multiple directions and I'm not sure if the direction that I'm going is the right way, particularly in the context of like training or anything physical, taking the step back to have a session and reset my expectations and just go into it with like I'm going to try something new or something different or something that I might look really really stupid on but seems like it'll be fun with the group of people that I'm doing it with is a really good way for me generally to go out get out of that headspace of like self-consciousness and anxiety about like oh the future what am I
Yeah.
doing and instead just kind of live in that moment and reset my expectations. Do you have any stories of like I'm sure the stunt industry is insane and there's so much to learn, but it could either be like a comp story or in stunts where you really remember being having your eyes opened to like seeing how much you still had to learn.
Many times. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely many times. I feel like in stunts, no matter what, there that will come up like every single time I work, no matter how easy it is. Like if I just was called to go do an aerial or something like that, there would still be a part of me that's like, you gotta do it right though. Because there's so many people watching when you're on set too. I think that's the other thing that not a lot of people realize is it's like there's like 200 people every single time. There's like a huge crew. And when it's your turn, like everyone's really interested too, because it's stunts and they're like, oh, what you gonna do and stuff. And
Hmm.
so there's like not only a lot of eyes on you, but you're also not going on your own terms. Usually it's like a 3, 2, 1 action. So you have to like be able to do it like whenever, and then also be able to do it in whatever costume they give you. And so
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I can do a wall flip, but can I do a wall flip in any outfit, anywhere, at any time? And so it's kind of like every time I would work, there's always that element that might come up. Even still, like after doing it for 11 years or something, I'll always have that moment, just a little bit, but it's a bit more subconscious, if you will. Like it's a lot more in the background, but it's kind of like a little buzz, like just there. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, the same with competitions and all that kind of stuff. Every time I filmed a Red Bull Art of Motion video before I actually got selected, it was always that too. I'd submit a video, I'd be proud of it, but then I'd see like what gets selected, and I was like, okay, I still have a lot to improve on. I still have so much to work on. And it's funny because I look back at my career and it was such a great growth mindset, but there's part of me that wishes that I could go back to when I was just really good and just enjoy that a little bit more rather than be like,
Hmm.
oh, but I got to be so much better. I got to be so much better because now I look back and I'm like, man, but it's also, it's hard. You want to be able to hold two truths at once. Like, I have so much to improve on, and I'm also really good. Like, I never had that second one when I was training, like at my quote unquote peak.
Yeah. Do you feel like that was an internal pressure that you were putting on yourself, or do you feel like you were also getting some external motive? I mean, because from my perspective, it's wild to me that I think you get way less credit as the most goated female parkour athlete of all time. Like honestly, most goated competitive parkour athlete ever, because for what 5 or 6 years, like I don't know. You can correct me. I don't know there's a competition that you entered that you didn't win, which is insane. At least in style, because I know you did a couple like at SPL and stuff. You did a few times like skill and some other things, but that like to me the fact that you were feeling like this urgency to continue to improve when from outside, at least in my eyes, I was looking at you and I'm like, Sydney could just like show up and wipe the floor right now with basically anybody in the world. And that was kind of my perspective in comp for probably, yeah, 5 years at least. And to this day, still, like, I will have conversations with people about like video project ideas or whatever. And I bring up Sydney and I'm like, Sydney's not even training that much anymore. I feel like if Sydney was motivated and had 6 weeks, like you would be throwing down still like world class lines in outdoor or comp or wherever. It's more of just a like, is the motivation there to tap back into that? But to get back to my question, because I wanted to give you that
Mm-hmm.
context from and hype you up a little bit from my perspective. But yeah, did it feel like almost exclusively internal, or did you also feel like you were getting some
Oh,
external?
well, first of all, thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate the kind words. And yeah, it never felt like that. That's the funny thing is that like I knew it. Like I knew I was winning all these competitions and stuff. And like but there was always this like, well, I want this one. This one will make me feel like I'm good. And the next one and the next one and the next one. So there was never that feeling of like I'm really holding this and like I feel like I'm winning. It never really felt that way to me. And I think yes, it felt like external at the time, but it was always internal. And I didn't realize that at the time. But I look back on it now and it just 100% was internal. It was the pressure that I was putting on myself that I learned from when I was a kid because I had like a really strict gymnastics coach. One of them was abusive. So when I actually went in to do some inner healing and kind of be with that child that was kind of put a lot of pressure on her, I noticed all the ways in which I would take that and make it mean that I have to be good enough, otherwise, I'm not loved. And so that was something that I carried with me into adulthood, but was completely oblivious to it until I like went back and looked at it. So yes, I felt external pressure from other people, but it was always actually just me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's yeah, that's good context. I mean, I think that's also such a the athlete's curse. I think so many athletes who do have the internal, you're burning, there's some combustion happening in your internal engine to get you to a level, particularly in the context of competition. But even, I mean, I look at like people like again like Dylan, who's now been open about his journey and experience with like drug abuse, and Nick Ortiz and some other folks who've like had struggles with mental health. And so many of the times that I look at people who seem to be at the top of their game, internally the fuel that they're burning is this kind of anxiety or depression or building off of something that's a little bit darker inside of them, and they're able to harness it. But there are also many situations where I think like the they burn the fuel and the fumes off of that are not so good. And it really depends. I mean, obviously you were able to step back and realize that, like, yeah, how you were maybe motivating yourself wasn't the best approach for you long term if where you wanted to go. Um, but I think that's always a good, I also think phrasing it that way where like in the moment it feels like it's all external
Mhm.
pressure, and then having the space to take a step back and realize it's internal is a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
Because telling somebody in that moment like, no, it's all in your head, or oh, you're just putting too much pressure on yourself, that is just another thing that feeds that fire of like, I'm gonna show you this is all real.
100%.
Like,
And it's if you're living in the prison, like, because that's the way I see it. I was living in a prison that I made up that I'm not good enough. And so the way that I
mm,
compensated was to try and be good enough by winning or getting new moves or whatever it may be. And it's like a dirty fuel. It's exactly what you said. It's kind of like this darker energy, and it works really well until it just doesn't. And then
mm-hmm,
I actually noticed that in 2022 is sort of when I made a shift and felt what it could be like to step out of that and just be like, you know what, I'm going to go in with zero expectations and just like let myself just, if I suck, just let myself suck. Like, how fun would that be to just take all of the pressure off? And so that was when I competed at Estapolia for a Red Bull Art Emotion there. And that was probably my favorite competition to date because I just like the first day I think I was in second place behind Lilu because it was 3 day three different days.
mm-hmm.
I was in second place behind her and I'm like, this actually feels great. Like it's good to know what that feels like, but I'm still gonna try. And so it was like,
Yeah, I was like, spoiler alert, you still you still won, right? You did, you was you or you came in first on
mhm.
that one, right? And that was when you did the souk as well.
Yeah, yeah. She
Yeah,
brought out
which
that
is
like competitive fire, but in a really good way. And so then since then
mm-hmm.
too, like I've, lost to Lilu in 2023 and I was like so glad to kind of just be in that place where I felt no pressure to be first. It was like, oh, this actually just feels good and I'm just so excited for her. And I was thinking about how, 5 years prior that just I would not have felt that. So it was
Yeah,
big growth.
that's awesome. It's also very foreign to me, having never been remotely good enough to have the experience of like, God damn it, I'm in second place. I would be like ecstatic. I'm like looking at Tim Champion, and I'm like, I'm in second place to that machine, like that absolute unit of a man. Oh my gosh, wow, I'm amazing. So it's really fun to hear because it is like this is such a common thing to people who are at the level that you have been at for so long in the sport. And it almost sometimes is it's it's great to hear you break it down because not that many people necessarily can articulate like the internal mechanisms that are driving them through those spaces. And it's also very funny because I understand it, and then simultaneously I'm like, wow, being second to Lilu, oh man, it's
I know it's hard because like yeah,
yeah,
I could feel that too when I look back on it. I'm like, wow, that's dramatic. But then also during the time that I was in it, it didn't feel that way. It felt like very
no.
intense. It felt like
Well, and you need to have stakes to be motivated. And I think that's always been something that for me, like personally with competition and parkour in general, and this is maybe something that we can talk about too, is like I think some people are really good at creating high stakes for
mhm.
themselves, and that can be positive. Like you can do it in a way where you are in competition, you're looking at somebody pushing themselves. And there's a lot of those moments I think about, like with Brandon Hooper and Tim recently in skill in this past year, and they're just like going back and forth, and it's like you get to that like buzzer beater type moment and you can see two people who are getting the best because they're pushing against each other and kind of working together to tap into that like last 1%. Or obviously you can take it negatively. But where was I going with this entire thing? This is what happens when I'm half listening to my child screaming in her crib. Um,
You're good. I'm enjoying the conversation nonetheless. It's fun.
yeah, so with creating stakes for yourself, some people I feel like are very good at it. I've always struggled to find ways to sort of enhance the motivation or the stakes, because realistically, like in parkour, nothing that we do needs to be done ever. And that's kind of where my brain always goes is I could just not. do any of these things when they get scary or too hard or whatever. And it's very hard for me to create artificial stakes for myself. Do you feel like, other than maybe the internal pressures that you've already talked about, you've had any positive tips, like more beneficial reinforcement mechanisms for building those stakes for yourself, be it in competition or trying, to land a souk outside on hard ground? Like, how do you create that sense of like, I really want and need to do this for yourself?
Yeah, I always work really well under pressure. That's something that I've noticed about myself. And so there was just a few tips that I had back in the day that always seemed to work for me was tell someone about it. So sorry, I just got a delivery. Don't worry about that. But one of them was the
Shout out the sponsor
it actually
dropping
is
free gear
yeah.
at your house right now.
Oh, link in bio. No, but I would always tell someone about it. So I'd put it out into the world like this is something that I'm working towards. I really want to do it. So it would usually be a friend that I was training with. I think the first time I wanted to do a souk outside, it was like so scary and foreign, the idea of even doing it. But I was like, I want to do this outside. And I kind of gave myself a timeline of when I was going to do it by. So I think I gave myself a month to prepare for it, and I would just do them every day and just do like 3 to 5 of them every day, landed, and that was it. And then the day came, and I was like, all right, we're doing it, like no going back. And so it was like I knew in my head, of course, like if I go there and I don't want to do it, I don't have to. But by then I had already
Hmm.
committed to so much. Like I had told someone about it. I'd like prepared all this stuff to be able to do it. So there was just kind of like, I'm ready and I know that. So there's no turning back. And that's sort of how I would deal with the pressure, and it would work really well for me. But of course, everybody's different. And I actually lean more now towards what you said. It's like, I actually don't need to do this. Like, nothing in parkour needs.
Laziness, we call it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, it's changed how I feel about it. But now, when I find myself wanting to do something that scares me a little bit, or something that's like outside of my comfort zone, the way I actually push myself is with what you just said. It's, I don't have to do this, but I'm choosing to do it. And like allowing myself to know that. And if I don't feel
Hmm.
like going for it that day, I just put it out there that like, but I do want to do it. And I am going to come back and I am going to do it. And I hold myself to that because I think personally, like being able to stick to my word develops a lot of self trust within myself, and that creates confidence. And so, the most confident I get is like when I stick to my word, even if that's just something like, oh, we're going to hang out and get coffee, and then we actually do it. That's how I create more confidence. So, just being a person of my word has always really helped.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. I think that's something that people talked about. The whole concept of commitment, it's really interesting because I feel like we've almost gone so far in the direction of send
Mhm.
culture and embracing the like this sort of like mystical, you do a couple preps, something happens, and then you go for it. And 10 or 15 years ago, I remember having a lot of conversations with people like, the Merm guys about things like commitment. And what you just said is actually what Dylan and Brandon and a lot of people said, which is from the smallest thing, trying to execute on your expectations, like whether that's physical or in your social life or whatever, just like knowing clearly, like, this is what I want to do here, and then following through on it. And if you can't follow through on it, creating a framework for like how that doesn't break this self reinforcing trust loop.
Yeah.
I think that's a really powerful, I don't want to say neglected because people internalize it. And I think that's what a lot of people do. But I think vocalizing it, particularly now, is really powerful.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah, definitely. And I think the
yeah.
other part to it too is that like when you strip away everything, we are confidence itself. Like we have confidence always. It's just the stuff that we put on top of it. It's the stories, like we said before. So, yeah, if you didn't commit to it something or whatever, then you're like, oh, I guess I can't like follow through with my word. It's like, no, take that off too. Like just pretend it didn't even happen. Like just go back and yeah,
Yeah. Or reframing it as like, I'm now confident that when I don't feel able to do a thing, I can walk away and not injure myself. and I'm not going to put myself in a corner where, no matter what, even though I was a little bit too tired or X or Y, I committed to it anyway and got hurt. And that, I think for me, when we were talking about complacency earlier, I definitely land a little bit further on the complacent end of the spectrum than some other athletes. But I also think that that's a big reason why I've been able to train for almost 20 years without any surgeries or major injuries or breaks, really, is that when I do want to do something, you don't let like a setback or a temporary decision to abort the
Yeah,
mission like change your overall perspective. You don't, you can lose battles and not lose the war, I guess would be another way of saying it. And knowing that like you can lose a battle without it redefining your relationship to something is really empowering, because it does let you reframe yourself, like keep yourself feeling confident and having that faith in yourself without, yeah, without destroying it or starting to kind of like chip away at that foundation.
absolutely. And I think even when you said like that you are on the more complacent side, I would say that language doesn't even work for what you just said. I think you're just definitely like on the longevity side of it. Like you're smart. Like for me,
Yeah.
I just
I
no,
appreciate that.
for
Thank
real,
you,
like you're
Sydney.
smart and you know your body. Like I went through many times where I didn't and got hurt many times. I've had a few surgeries here and there and like lots of injuries. And so I went through a phase of like just basically getting stuck in the mud, like throwing myself off the deep end and figuring out like fuck around, find out, you know. Sorry if I was not supposed to swear.
Margot is
I'm
listening
so
right now.
sorry, I
No.
know. But yeah, it's like I was doing a lot of that and it was beneficial in the sense that like now I know, okay, well maybe it doesn't work if I like don't warm up at 7 in the morning and chuck a gainer off of a 7 foot drop. Like maybe I know that now, but it took me a while to
Yeah.
get to that place where I was smart with my training. So it's nice to see that you've always kind of had that and yeah, and you've kept yourself from getting I know you've had injuries and stuff here and there, but not like to the point where you had to stay out of it for like a year or so.
Yeah. No, I think like the most I've ever had to stay out is like 6 weeks,
That's
maybe.
awesome.
And that was probably even, I was probably still able to do some training, but just had to work around a thing. Like, oh, I broke a bone in my wrist or something. And I'm like, take 2 weeks off and then you're jumping again, but you can't do climb ups for four
Right.
months. Like those are definitely have happened.
Yeah.
But um, yeah, I mean, longevity is definitely a thing. I was curious too, because so much of your training, I think you've gone through like a periods where you filmed a ton of the highlight style stuff, especially I think about your, I don't know if it was 2016 or 2018. You had one Art of Motion submission video that in my brain is just like iconic.
Try
It was like
2019.
five
Yeah.
lines, 2019, like all time, just some savage lines in there. And then you went through a period where you're doing a lot of YouTube vlogs, which I also really enjoyed getting to see as just like a different take. And you have not been filming quite as much training recently, but how is your body feeling these days?
Yeah, no, I just for some reason I don't have as much of a desire to film and it's not because I'm like this isn't good enough or anything. It's just more of like it's just for me right now. My body is doing pretty well. I'm recovering from an ankle injury. I was working and I just did a what do you I don't even know what they're called. It's like one of those things where you start in a back handspring and you half twist to a front handspring, which I am not good at. But anyway, I did that and the mat that I was doing it on because it was like a little warm up and they had one of those really short mats for me and I did it onto a mat and it moved and so my ankle, I oh my god, I rolled it off of it so hard. It was just disgusting. I heard a total crunch and everything. This is 2 months ago. And I stayed off of it for like a week, but then I had to return to work. I had
As one
a
does.
trap door I had to do. And I just kind of one thing that's like a little weird about me is I'm really good at like pushing through the pain and just kind of ignoring it. So I try not to do that so much. And then after those jobs, I was kind of like, all right, we're resting it, we're gonna get better and all that. And so now it's been about 2 months and it's still like it's lingering, but it's doing a lot better than it was. And I've got some work
Hmm.
coming up on it that's definitely parkour related that I really need it for. So yeah, right now I just my training looks very different. I still train a bunch of like parkour stuff. I still train flips, all that, but I add in like a lot more mobility, weightlifting, boxing. I train boxing probably just as much as I train parkour now. And yeah, that's kind of,
Is that so that you can take out Rich before he gets you on the
oh
ground,
my God.
BJJ
Yes,
style?
that's the
You
thing.
gotta, yeah, you don't want to get on the ground, but if you can take him in striking distance,
He,
knock him out
it was
first, then
so
you're
funny
good.
because one thing that I like am decent at is judo. So like I'll get Richard on the ground, but then I'm like, why did I do that? Because now he's on the ground, he can beat
He's just like, yes, here we go. Practice time.
yeah, he's you
Yeah.
idiot. But yes, no, I definitely have a goal of that. No, I'm kidding. But no, I just like to I really just like it at this point. It was originally for my punches to look better for film and all that accuracy and that kind of stuff because with stunts obviously it's very different. Your boxing technique is like more wide and all that, but at the same time it's like there's a piece of accuracy. Like you have to be able to elbow someone and not actually elbow them. Um and that was something I fun fact, I punched Corey DeMeyers in the face in 2015. Um, right in the nose. It was never the same after that. And yeah, it scared me for a long time to be able to.
It was allegedly an accident.
It was actually twice. That's the worst part about it is I didn't learn the first
Oh
time.
my God. Oh
That was a long
man.
time ago.
That's
But he still holds it
that's
over my head
wild.
nowadays. I'm like, okay, I wonder when we're gonna let this one go.
Well, I know Corey's still in LA,
Mhm.
right? And Jesse, is he's like in North
He's in
Carolina
North
now, or
Carolina now,
where?
yeah.
Have you gotten to work with either of them much recently, or do you get to see either of them
Um,
pretty
I see
recently?
Corey a bit more because he's still in LA. But Jesse, I haven't got to see him in a little while now. Last time I saw him, I think was at Kings of the Concrete. He came here for a little bit when we were
That
doing
makes
that in
sense.
Venice. But every once in a while, I get to work with either of them, and it's so much fun. It really is just the best.
Yeah. I've been wanting to have them on, and I'm curious on your perspective or of your perspective on this since you know them so
Mhm.
well. But I think like they got a lot of flack for their style for a long time.
Mhm.
And I think that I was obviously one of the people who was like, I don't really like how this looks. In my defense, I don't think I've ever said a bad word about either of them as human beings because especially like Jesse's ability at jams and stuff to interact with kids, they'd come up to him fanboying and he was just handle it so well. And I always admired that because so many parkour athletes, like I remember some of the UK guys, my first experiences with them, and they get so overwhelmed and they just like disappear. And you're like, these kids traveled like 8 hours and paid $100 to see you, and you're like not giving them the time of day. But it was because they were just like, I'm not famous, or and like Jesse was always so good at just being like, I'm gonna give you what you want out of this experience, which is like the picture and the having somebody to look up to, and like Corey as well. Um, but the interesting thing, obviously, has been that the style that I think they pioneered turns out to have just been about a decade ahead of its time because now grabs and off axis and all of that stuff is super in. And yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on, seeing them developing that in like 2012 to 2016, 2017, and then now seeing it finally kind of become more of the norm at events like SPL.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of those things where, first of all, they're great people. Love Jesse and Corey. And I think if you don't know them personally, I can see where it's easy to like make certain judgments about them specifically from online personalities and stuff. But then once you meet them, they're just amazing people. But yeah, as far as that's concerned, watching that style, I think it's true that they don't necessarily get enough credit for it, but that is kind of what I've noticed is a theme amongst parkour. Like a lot of us that were towards maybe more of, I don't want to say the beginning, but pioneering certain aspects of it aren't going to get the same sort of credit as some of the newer people that bring something, resurrect something, or are reaping benefits of what maybe more of the pioneers kind of did, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's also just like a cultural, like there's like a cultural moment, and it's like finding the right person to carry the torch in a way that it impacts the new generation. Because I mean, I think that this is just like LA has a vibe, and especially when you work in stunts or you work in Hollywood, I've always been very fascinated watching, including like you are the least person like this, I think, but I think everybody in Tempest just has like a certain like professionalism about how they interact, even inside of parkour, that is very different
Mm.
from some other people who are just like, I'm just gonna get shit faced and end up naked in front of you. And I feel
And that's
like Tempest has always been a little more buttoned up, not in the sense of like, not having fun, but just more in a like, it's like it always feels a little bit like I'm just going to keep business in the back of my mind because that is what you have to do when parkour or stunts are your job. And you know that like everyone you talk to might pay your next paycheck or
for
rent or
sure.
whatever.
Yeah.
And I feel like with Jesse and Corey, they always, and I think like I was just chatting about, I forget which episode it was. I was talking about I Flew in LA,
Mm.
and it's been really interesting to me because from then through the Jesse and Corey era, I feel like there's this line of like I Flew in LA, looking back to me, was such an iconic piece of parkour videography. And on the Tempest Gym video being like in the middle of those, and then Jesse and Corey. And it was just like the 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 vibe of it was like 10% too far out of what people expected for it to stick. And then it took like, I don't know, a Josh Malone or somebody who just like looked like they just didn't care that much and had this like avant-garde approach for it to feel authentic when they did it. Even though obviously for Jesse and Corey, like they did have a martial arts tricking and an inline background, and like they were very familiar with that movement and it was authentic for them. But there's just like something about the presentation of it that didn't stick. And I find it really interesting in parkour to look at those moments and be like, what, like it's so interesting that this person did this, but it was just like 5% too far out of what the expectation was, or like they were like 10% too different from the rest of the people in the community at that
Mm.
time for that thing to stick. That's not even a question. I was
No.
just It's just kind of been my observation. And then yeah, I think it's interesting that like LA tends to be, in the US at least, I've seen it. I feel like that's where it collects because so many talented people first off go to LA and then make it their home. So it has like a talent hotbed. And then also I think because the culture of LA, if you're like a broke person in Brighton versus somebody who's like trying to make a living in stunts in LA, like your approach to how you present yourself is going to be incredibly
It is for
different.
sure. And it's an interesting reflection too, like what the community sort of responds to and whether or not they appreciate certain things and certain aspects. Like I noticed too that it was weird. I had moments where like when I was more of the underdog, I got a lot more like we love Sydney. Sydney's awesome. And then when I was like not the underdog anymore, it's like uh Sydney's overrated. That kind of stuff. It's sitting with
Hmm.
those reflections of just like how people perceive you, I guess, and just realizing like you've no control over that. And so even with things like Jesse and Corey and their style versus someone newer that's doing sort of the same style, and that newer person might be getting more of the credit and that kind of stuff. I see it less of like who did it first and all that, and I see it more of just like the moves are kind of coming through you. They don't really belong to you, if that makes sense. That's
Hmm.
the way I've always seen it. So it's like it doesn't matter
Yeah.
who does it first or who did it what way or any of that. I just see it more as like we're all just creating something at the end of the day. And it's like for me
Yeah.
personally, I don't really care anymore about the credit of like, oh, was she the first to do this or whatever. I don't care about any of that anymore. I used to, but I don't anymore. And I think you're right. There is like something different about the way people in LA show up. Like even personally, like I won't tell people when I'm injured on social media usually anymore because it's like, oh, I don't want them to know that like if they want to hire me for a job and whatever that like I've got, a little ankle injury that I'm dealing with because I don't want them to not hire me because of that. And so it's like there
Yeah.
there is that business in the back of your mind that you're constantly aware of that you're not always like maybe even conscious of.
Yeah. And it makes it hard.
Mm.
I don't want to say hard to be like your authentic
Mm.
self, but I think that you just have to curate things a little bit more. And that's true, I think, just in general when you have a certain level of success and visibility, is like the more visibility you have, the more you have to curate how you're presenting yourself. And I think that something that now, as that I'm an adult, I look at like the Off the Edge tour, which you were a part of, right? You were on that,
Um,
and or no, you were From Here to There. Is that the
I was, oh
because you
God,
were in the doc, but were you on the
I
tour?
no, I was on the Lace Up tour, so that was like the shoe that
Okay,
Jesse put together with Tempest, and we went around promoting that all over the US. I showed up at one of the events on the, which one was it? Was it Off the Edge? I think it was either From Here to There or Off the Edge. Like they've done so many tours, it's actually mind blowing to me when I think about it. Like that's a lot of work. I can't remember what I was going to say with it, but yes.
no, you're good. What I was getting at there that I think it's like interesting to talk to you about is and I do want to like again, I want to have this conversation with Jesse and Corey because I'm really curious to hear their thoughts. Now that I'm older and like trying to contribute to supporting a family and like looking to the future, being like, I'm going to try and brand myself and put my face on the side of a bus feels like it makes a lot more sense than when I was like 22 and broke and looking at it as the cringiest possible thing. Because at that age, I was like, the community that matters to me are the 600 people in North America and Europe that talk to each other online and share stuff on Instagram, and no one else matters. And I think that as I have gotten older, I see that like, oh, actually, those 600 people are very important because they do, really like they're the most vocal people in kind of what defines the culture at that time. But if like you want to make a living, they're not going to pay your bills. Like they're half of them are broke, including myself at that time. I was just like, hey, I don't even know if I can pay to go into the Lace Up tour. Can I come as like a guest athlete or something? And so I think I understand the perspective that maybe they were at then a lot more. And I'm curious, from your perspective, do you feel like the community as it's aged, the parkour community as it's aged, is getting a little bit more understanding of the allowing people to maybe have like a more public persona and a more private persona and not judging them as much for it?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that I feel that I can share more of myself and not feel weird about it. And I'm just gonna say too that Jesse was 33 when we did the tour. I'm 33 now. So it's like it's weird to imagine like him at this age, and that was like the choices he were making.
Yeah, now he's so old and he's still
But
killing
it's
it.
it's right. It's like when you're younger, you don't quite see where that makes sense, and there's kind of a maturity that comes along with that. But I really think, in terms of the parkour community, I always wonder like how much of that is like kind of me feeling like I can just share myself authentically because I've decided that I there's nothing to hide, or if it's because the parkour community feels more accepting. It's just one of those two. I always think that everything external always starts with it within. So it's like an internal thing that reflects outwardly, like the way people view us is usually a reflection of the way that we view ourselves. So the times that I was like, I felt most judged by the parkour community, whereas the times that I was really judgmental towards myself. And like I'd almost seek them for a validation of like, but I'm okay, right? And it was never going to feel like that I was okay because I was really craving that validation from myself, if that makes sense. So I think it's like it's an interesting thing. Yeah, I feel way more okay with sharing more of my insecurities and all that I didn't feel like I used to be able to share, because I just, yeah, I realized there's nothing wrong with having insecurities. And the parkour community reflects that. Like, it's okay to have that. And it's actually really good to share it too.
Yeah, it is. Wow, that was a way deeper, more resonant answer than I'd anticipated. Well played. Well played,
Thank you.
Sydney. Uh, what do you, I'm like trying to figure out how to phrase this. I guess when you look at, because I like that you obviously were defining the scene for so long, and not that you've like, I don't want to say you've taken a step back, but you've like maybe taken a step to the side where it, you have a little bit of a different perspective than when you were immersed in every art of motion and like couldn't even look up to see what was happening around you because you're competing all the
Mhm.
time. What do you look at right now that you like makes you excited? And do you look at anything right now that you're like, ugh?
Ooh, good question. Well, there's actually a lot of excitement. Like, one of them, I just listened to your episode with Chloe Reynolds. And I love seeing that more like artistic movement that hasn't really been done in a certain way. Like obviously Matt McCreary has a similar style and stuff, and it's just really nice to see parkour taken different directions, whether or not it's like Ellis Torhall doing just crazy things that are like things I would joke about being like
Video
yeah,
game challenges, yeah.
I would look at and I'd be like, oh yeah, like swing, double back, grab the bar, and like all this like stuff that would just come up in my mind as like a total impossibility, and he's doing. But then there's also the
Yeah.
flip side of people just being so creative in their styles, and I just
Hmm.
love seeing that so much. As far as the like the cringiness, I really have to think about that actually, because like I as far as being in the community, I know that I'm looking more from the side, so I don't see everything every day anymore. So I don't really feel like I have anything to say.
I'll tell you
What's your
mine. Mine is that gloves have come
have they
back.
really?
Fingerless gloves. I don't know actually if they've come back, but I've seen them in like multiple videos as a style choice, and I'm just like, oh, dude, nah. This is like the low rise jeans coming back. It's like we lived through the first iteration and realized this was not a good vibe.
No, yeah.
I've seen the fingerless gloves come in, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know how I feel about this one, but maybe somebody can change my mind. I'll just stay open minded on it.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that, but now I'm gonna like notice it everywhere because you said it. And
There's like not a lot of people that do it, and it's funny too because like it used to be that the noobs were the ones that would wear gloves, like try and protect their hands. And of the people that I can think of now, like they're all sick. Like they're all like doing way cooler stuff than I would be able to do, and then they're just like choosing to also wear gloves, which is hilarious to me.
yeah, I hadn't noticed that one. I'm trying to think of another cringe.
Keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I'll have to get back to you on what like makes me cringe as far as the parkour scene is concerned. But I feel like relatively, I've just been enjoying watching people's movement. And not last year, I think in 2024, I got to go up and judge SPL. I was supposed to go last year, but then I ended up working. Um, but even then, it's just like it's so fun to go to a style competition. Okay, okay, I've got one. I've got a cringe. I've got it. Combo competitions when people don't know what a combo is. That one makes me cringe.
I love the combo round as a concept.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I don't know if it's just that the judges, and you being a judge and Christine having been a judge for many years, like I've had this conversation with her and she's like, I know she has at least vocalized this. I don't know if it's just going to be like 1 year where the judges have to be like, I'm literally going to give you a zero if you don't do a combo.
Yeah, I think
And you're just going to get a zero on your first thing because you can't listen. Or if it's like a commute, because at this point, like they've explained it enough times that I'm like, if you've been here for 5 years and you still don't realize that you can't take 3 steps between a thing and have it count as a combo, like you deserve to get a zero on that because you're just trying to like play the system a little bit, or you just don't understand, and like that's the only way that maybe you're gonna get it at this point.
yeah, I was really strict on it when I was judging, and then the other two were kind of not because you'd see people like that were
People are doing sick stuff and you're like, I don't want to give this like a 4 because you just did whatever, like a quad full or some
yeah.
crazy,
I
trick, but also like it's not the right round for
I
that.
think in 2023, again, I was working, so I wasn't able to go, but I was supposed to judge, but I was watching it. And I remember, I think was it Say that did like a Webster, and then he lands on one leg and goes directly into a triple cork. And people
Yeah.
like they were like he scored way too high on it. It's like no, it was a combo. Like he did do a combo. So I think that
Yeah.
there is that makes me a little upset, I would say, is like the way people treat that round. Not the people doing it, but the way people react to it. Because it's
Hmm.
just like I think that yes, they've explained it a lot of times. It's like, okay, a wall full into a pop full is a combo. You like land and you go nowhere and you're going right
Plyometrically go do a thing.
plyometric.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so for me, that's like what gets me all riled up is like it's a
Yeah.
plyometric combo. Like let's
You would say wall full, pop full, Miss Sydney
well,
Olson.
because it's like my I don't know what to call it. It's like a
Signature
well, I
combo.
wouldn't say signature because it like went through many phases of like not being able to do it and then being able to do it, not being able to do it again, and now it's like, oh, it hurts too much. So I have to like but I do want to get it back. Like I mean, it's not that it went anywhere. Like I can still throw it. I just won't land it.
The- I can still throw it. I just won't land it. That's confidence inspiring language.
But
No, I think that's a good one. I feel like competitions in general. Actually, you know what? Another thing that I'm curious on your take,
mhm.
jams as like in general, not that they've like become cringe, but I would love to see more low budget
Mm.
jams. I feel like at some point in the last like 5 to 8 years, there became this expectation that like every jam has to be a money making or like financially sustainable thing that you're going to pay for it and you're going to get workshops and you're going to do, fly in athletes and like there obviously are still, I mean, Denver, we've got like weekly meetups and stuff, but I would love to see more of what the national jams were like 15 years ago, where it was just kind of like an unguided, chaotic sprawl through the city for 8 hours. And maybe there's like a group warm up and some other activity. But
Yeah,
that's like the one thing where I love that jams like OMFG, which is a festival, really. It doesn't even count as a jam, but I love that there are jams that are more structured, like Join or Die and things like that. But I do feel like it's been interesting to me to watch the like big jam era kind of die out and get replaced by this thing when realistically, like, I don't know, just saying we're going to have a jam in Denver in May, show up and like setting the expectation that it's like you're gonna show up and do parkour with your friends. I'm not gonna babysit you through it.
oh
Like,
my God.
I think that's like totally a fair thing to do as long as you tell people ahead of time and it's not like they get there and they're not, they're expecting a structured event and you're just don't deliver it. Like that would suck. But
Yeah, my favorite jams were always stuff like that. It felt more like, oh, we're just gonna go train. Like, if you want to come, come, and
yeah,
that sort of thing. Like, I always feel like I thrive in that environment, but like the bigger, more structured jams, I actually really don't love them. I like going to them. I like, being invited. And I like showing up and meeting people and talking.
for anyone who's
Yeah.
listening. Yeah.
But
Me
I
too,
don't like
actually. Now that you
training
say
at
it,
them.
yeah.
Like I feel uncomfortable sort of training at them at this point, just because it's like I don't know. There's always so many people. It's kind of awkward. I don't know how to explain it. Um,
They start to feel like showcases to me.
yeah, a
Like
little bit.
depending on the event, it feels like it's hard to kind of session
Mm.
and it almost feels more like every subsession in the jam is its own competition. And they're like very like they're more consumable. So if I go and I just want to chat with my friends and like see all my buddies, maybe do a little bit of training and watch sick stuff
Mhm.
happen, they are perfect. But if it's as far as like creating an environment where people with a bunch of different skill levels can kind of like train simultaneously, yeah, I feel like they're like they pigeonhole you a little bit more into being a spectator.
Yeah, definitely. That's the way I've always felt about it too. Because even just I don't know. I always felt really kind of awkward at the bigger jams. Like you said, there's sort of usually a little bit more ego at them too. Whereas like the ones that are just some of our friends and then some people that aren't, like we don't know them or anything. It's just like those are more fun because then you can just work on like a really basic jump with people that you don't know and it's just fun. Like I don't know, there's something about it that I really like, but yeah, the bigger ones I always just feel a little bit awkward at.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like
Yeah, I'll
there's
have to think about that.
expectation to be doing something, but it feels like busy work almost. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I also wonder if part of it is just like where we like the space that we occupy in the community and how much of like the expectation is, like using OMFG as an example, because it was probably the last big jam that I went to actually.
Same.
And it was really fun. Got to hang out, like we get to hang out and um it was a good time, but I think I felt like, oh, I should be doing what Phil or Robbie or Ed is, whatever they're doing at the time. But simultaneously, it's like my training schedule is different, my work schedule's, like you're kind of like there's a lot of variables that go into it. So maybe if I were in the position that I was 10 or 15 years ago, where I didn't either, I felt like I had to prove myself more, or I didn't feel like I had to prove myself at all.
Mhm.
That was like the sweet spot.
Sure.
Like there's either no pressure or there's way more pressure, and it's enough to like motivate me to get into the thick of it. And now I'm in the space where I'm like, I feel kind of pressure to do stuff, but not enough
Same.
to really inconvenience myself.
Totally same. Like I feel the pressure,
Yeah.
but that's okay. I can sit with the pressure.
I can also not. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. In some ways, I do think it makes you a better attendee. Like it means that I'm a lot more willing to actually like have conversations with
Mm.
people and talk, help somebody out through a challenge because I'm not like, bro, I'm trying to line up this rail double con, like get out of my way.
Yeah,
And
I
you're not in that
I felt
space.
like it was always either one or the other. Like I'd show up to a jam and I was either really into training and then like I don't know, and then I'd feel kind of awkward stopping to talk to people, or it was always like I'm just talking to people, I'm not really training. Like I never really found that healthy balance of like I can do both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. But anyway, I'd actually never even like as I was asking you and we were chatting about that, I'd never mentally articulated that to myself that that's something that I feel
Mm.
like I'd like to see more of in the community. And that's again not to cast any judgment or bad things about the jams that are out there, but there probably are some. Like I think Keep a Jam and some of the other European ones are maybe a little bit more like what I'm talking about. And I just feel like that culture in the US has really died. Maybe because people got sued and we need more insurance or something. Like I could also see reasons like that, but who knows?
Yeah, definitely.
Um yeah, I wanted to also like return really quickly to what you were saying about Chloe because I think there's a question I have there. We were talking about do you feel like the community has matured in the context of Jesse and Corey? And I look at somebody like Chloe as a really good positive answer that the community has matured because I think if she had shown up in parkour 10 or 15 years ago, a lot of people would have looked at her movement as gimmicky or inauthentic to the culture. And now I think there's a lot more people that see that as in addition to parkour culture, which is like definitely how I see it. I'm like, what a cool new branch that you're helping develop with people like Elias Zimakov and Matt McCreary, and Tam and a bunch of other athletes who are kind of experimenting in the space. But yeah, do you feel like that you'd agree that that's an example where maybe, especially being a woman in the sport, I mean, I think about like what uh oh my gosh, Alexander Shevchenko
Mm.
was doing with like the splits, backflip, and how often women in particular, like like a woman couldn't do an aerial without getting destroyed for like being an ex
Oh
gymnast
my
at some
God.
point for a decade of parkour. So I do feel like at least maybe from my perspective, maybe we're finally growing past that.
It's actually really funny you said that because like that was sort of blocked out of my mind and that I did remember that. I was like, "Oh yeah, I used to get like crucified for having a gymnastics background. I completely forgot." And it was something I was thinking about when you were interviewing her. So I was thinking like, "Wow, it's so interesting that if she came on the scene like back in I don't know, 2017, 2018, it might have been a different reaction to what she's doing, but now it's like seems really acceptable and celebrated, and it should be. Like it's
Hmm.
amazing what she's doing. Did you see her descent that she did the other day too?
Yeah, the heel hook one.
Crazy.
I can't remember if she'd said it on while we were recording the podcast or not, or maybe it was in the one that we ended up having to not record because she lost her voice halfway through
Hmm.
it. And I was like, dude, this was a great conversation. I am struggling to listen to your poor voice getting abused, answering my questions. Like I don't think you want this to be the podcast. But she had said she was looking for a heel hook
Okay.
descent somewhere.
Yeah.
And I saw that and I was like, wow, well, you knocked out one of your 2026
Did
goals real
quick.
quick.
It's like anyway,
Yeah.
so I was looking at that and I was thinking the exact same thing that you had just said. And then I remembered, yeah, like there was a part of me that was sort of ashamed of my gymnastics background and I didn't want to show that so much. So I had like this instinct to try and make my style a little bit dirtier over time, like stop making it so pretty. And it's like it just kind of naturally came that way. But now it's like it's interesting because then over the last like couple years I've enjoyed more tumbling too, just for fun. Like because
Hmm.
I still like I said, I still train parkour, but I'm not competing or anything. So it's like what's the point of like worrying about how people view it and whatever. But then it was really funny because I forgot this happened. This was maybe back in the summertime. I think Danny Marmolejo posted something that he had from his story about like SPL, because like I said, I was supposed to judge it. And he was like, well, it wasn't Danny that said this. It was some random guy. I don't know who it was. Danny wouldn't tell me. But anyway, he said something like, well, if Sydney's judging, then I'm screwed because she's just a gymnast. It's like, whoa, there's still people that say that. That's amazing. Because he must have like came across my stuff, like just me posting in the last like couple of years of, you know, more tumbling and stuff because I want to and because I can. And he thinks like, oh, this is my style now.
That's
It
hilarious.
made me laugh because I was
Wow.
just like, oh yeah, I forgot that like people were kind of purists back then. And they hated.
Yeah. It's ironic that like there was no reason to have that stigma then, and now there's like a pretty legitimate reason with
Yeah.
Fig to have an anti-gymnastics stigma, and we're kind of like, I mean, yeah, if they want to try, like as long as they're not trying to steal the sport, go for it. Yeah, Christine all the time talks about how she would like when she was starting. She was like, well, one of the only tricks that I could do was like the aerial sort of like Barani
Mhm.
when she started, but she's like, I can't actually do it in a line or film it because I know that as soon as I do that move, people are just gonna be like, gymnast, none of this counts. Like, I'm immediately discounting all of your training.
And it's like, yeah, it's the way people would say it as if it's like it doesn't you're not good because it's like cheating because you had a gymnastics background. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
bruh, like people that have the gymnastics background, they put so much of their life into that sport too, and they like worked really hard to get to where they're at. Who cares? It's like
Yeah.
pretty on.
That's why I don't rate Ellis. Ellis has a parkour background as a child, so I don't rate any of his stuff that he's doing right now. I think really you should only judge people who started at 18 or older with no athletic
There you go.
background. That's where we set the ceiling for true parkour,
Yeah.
the core,
Yeah. If you
the
start
core athlete.
18 after that, like no athletic ability, but then you come up at like 28 and you're just awesome, then there you go. You're the only one that like really counts.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Well, two more things I'd love to ask you. The first is I think it's really cool that we've seen in the sport, I think like a lot of different phases of how people talk about women in parkour. And I think you've been around for all of
Yeah.
them. And there's now, I think, like, especially in the comp scene, a lot of young women who are between like whatever 16, 17 and their early 20s that are probably finding themselves in a very similar situation to where you have been at other points in your life. What would you say to I'll use Lilu because I actually think she's not in this space. So I feel like I can say this in a safe way after talking to her. But maybe if somebody like a Lilu who is competing all the time and in the spotlight was struggling with the things that you've been talking about, like that dirty fuel and trying to redefine the relationship, what would you recommend to somebody in that position?
I think it's tough because it's funny. The fuel that was dirty, it brought me so far along that like I wouldn't change a thing. I remember actually someone it was actually
Double down on
yeah,
diesel.
it
Yeah.
was actually Richard that I remember we were on the Lace Up tour. It was before we were dating. And he and I were talking about this specifically and I was kind of mentioning a struggle that I had or something and he started to get to the bottom of it and then he actually said, "But I don't really want to fix it because I feel like it supports you. It like helps you." And I was glad that we didn't. We didn't get to the bottom of it for years because
That's husband
yeah,
material right there.
I know.
Damn.
I was like, marry me right now. Um, but so there's like, I think if someone were in that position and they're becoming aware of the fact that they are talking negatively to themselves, they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves. I think the first thing that I would say is like, it's okay. Like, first of all, I see where it's benefiting you because sometimes there is a massive benefit to it. See where it's not benefiting you and kind of like look at the different ways it impacts your life, whether it's positive or negative. I really like to view things mostly as neutral, and then we kind of make decisions on whether or not it's a good thing for us or a bad thing. Um, but anyway, like as far as that pressure is concerned, ask yourself like where is it coming from? Is it really coming from other people? Is it coming from you? Why is it coming from you? And I think the best way to get to the bottom of that is questions, just lots of questions to ask yourself, like, is this true about me as a whole? And if it's not, what's a better way to relate to myself and the world around me? I think it's just a place to start. But I also do mindset coaching. So if anyone's interested in that, they can reach out. But if it's not with me, anyone, I would recommend, I wish I would have had that as an athlete, is a mindset coach, especially for performance coaching, because that is something that I really could have benefited from back then that I definitely didn't have. But so if it's not with me, just like maybe find someone that you can bring these concerns to. I think it's a lot more normal than people realize. So if someone was, yeah, in that position where they're feeling like the weight of the world on their shoulders, feeling like they have to be the best, otherwise they're not going to get love. It's like, well, where did that come from? Is it true? Because I can guarantee you it's not. It's a false story that we've made up about ourselves in order to like try harder.
Fantastic. Find yourself a single British man. Nice, smart British boy who can identify the issue and then say, you know what, though, this is really working for you, so we're not going to
Ah,
touch this
it's
yet.
weird. Like, I'll...
Just stay in touch. We'll go to Sedona a couple times, go on a little road trip. Who knows where that'll take us?
Oh my God. It's just the best.
I should have put up, I have Richard, it's behind, his art is behind the Keepa magazine right now.
God.
Wait, I'll get it afterwards, but sometimes I like to rotate these out in the background, and so I've had his up for like half of them, and I switched it to one of the Keepa mags. No, I think that's a great answer, because I do know, obviously being now a dad of a daughter and having like getting to talk to Christine, who's been in that comp scene, and even just like talking to Megan McQueen, who's been in it more recently, and hearing like what's changed in the last 10 years and like what hasn't. I think it is objectively harder as a young woman in the sport, particularly in the competition space, because it's a smaller pool and there's just it's inherently a little bit easier maybe to just put that pressure on yourself. And obviously your experiences are very relatable to anyone who maybe finds themselves in that spot now.
Yeah.
So thank you. I'll get you my last question, which I always ask, is if you had to recommend one piece of media, so it could be a book, podcast, film, to the audience, what would it be?
Oh my God. Right now I'm going to say a book that was really, really helpful for me was called You Are Enough by Panache Desai. And it kind of goes into sort of the narratives that we tell ourselves and what we really are on the inside. Because I think, especially amongst parkour people, I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of us make it our identity and our whole world. It's
Weird. I've never heard that.
so it's really a good book in terms of like we're not any of the things that we think we are. And I think that's a really helpful thing because it helps take the pressure off of like it has to be this or else. So once you realize that you're not parkour and like you're a whole human being that is multifaceted and has so many different amazing gifts to offer the world, because like I can promise you, I used to think that I was only good at parkour, and I think that's like a ridiculous an arrogant thing to say now. But I didn't see it that way back then. And so anyway, I read that book and it really helped me step outside of myself a little bit and understand kind of how beautiful life really is as a whole.
Well, Sydney Olson, thank you for such an articulate and thoughtful and insightful conversation. And I apologize that half of my attention for the first 20 minutes was on my child screaming the ABCs in the background. But no, that was absolutely fantastic. And I hope everybody who's listening got as much out of that as I did, because yeah, that was a blast.
Well, thank you, Max. And I really appreciate getting to talk to you. And I'm so glad that you're going to talk to me on my podcast next week, and we're going to get into everything. It's going to be so much fun. So
true.
Yeah,
I know. I'm wildly unprepared, just the way I like it.
it's perfect. Now that we had like you interviewing me, I'm like, ooh, I have some stuff I want to like dig into that you had said. So it's perfect.
I found that episode really insightful. Thank you, Sydney, for being on again. And if you are unfamiliar, you're not already a listener, she has her own podcast called Collecting Scars, which I will be linking in the description. A lot of the episodes are a lot shorter than this, so if you had time to listen to this, you probably could check that out. And particularly if you like some of the sort of Hollywood industry stuff that Sydney was talking about and the growth and self-development and reflection aspect, which was a lot of what we spent time talking about here. That's a very heavy emphasis in her podcast, and she chats with so many interesting people. I'm very excited to be, what say, Tuesday. I'm excited to be out there this week. So our episode on collecting scars will probably be out next week, and looking forward to doing that and seeing what she asks me and where that conversation goes. It's always fun chatting with Sydney. And if you, like me, are somebody who's constantly struggling with the questions of balance, complacency, and maintaining motivation in a world where added responsibilities kind of can slowly chop away at that motivation, I think this is a good podcast. And I hope you think so too. Thank you, as always, for listening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week.